Now you guys are going to have to forgive me on this. I'm going to try and sound this out. Fort Nooherooka. I grew up right here in eastern North Carolina, and I was 50 some years old before I realized what this was. Most people think history happened somewhere else. Gettysburg, Jamestown, Yorktown, Pennsylvania. I drove all the way with my family when I was in 1976. I was 7 or 8 years old, drove all the way up to Pennsylvania to Philadelphia and participated in the bicentennial celebration of the nation. And I didn't realize that one of the major wars in the founding of our nation was fought right here on the ground that I walk on. You know, these places have visitor centers, gift shops, school field trips, and some of the most important events in American history happen in these places. Many drive past every day without ever realizing it. This series I'm going to do will tell the story of Fort Nooherooka. It was a Tuscaroran stronghold near present-day Snow Hill, North Carolina. That's right, Snow Hill should be on the map. A place where the future of eastern North Carolina was decided in the spring of 1713. For generations, the storybooks of Nooherooka remained largely forgotten outside academic circles and native communities. Yet the consequences of what happened there shaped the future of Greene County, Pitt County, Lenoir County, and much of the land that we call home today. This is not simply a story about a battle. It's a story about a homeland, a memory, a survival, about a people who stayed and the people who left. And the history still written deep in the fields, forests, and creeks of eastern North Carolina. You see, I grew up in the tick-bite community. I walked the fields that were covered in arrowheads. I climbed twisted trees whose stories I would later come to understand decades later. I dug artifacts from out of the ground, and I spent much of my life without realizing what I was growing up inside. I was actually inside one of North Carolina's oldest stories. Join me as we travel back more than 3 centuries to the world of the Tuscarora people and the battle that changed eastern North Carolina forever. I'm Todd Edwards, and this is Tick Bite NC. And this is the story of Fort Nooherooka. Let me ask you a question. How many times have you driven through Greene County, maybe headed to work, maybe going hunting, maybe passing through? Now let me ask you another question. How many times have you driven through Greene County and thought about a battlefield? Probably never. And that's understandable because the battlefield is not obvious. There's no towering walls, there's no cannons, there's no rows of monuments stretching to the horizon. There's just fields, trees and creeks, quiet country roads. But 300 years ago, one of the most important battles in North Carolina happened right there. It's hard to believe, isn't it? It really is. A battle that changed eastern North Carolina forever. A battle that most people have never heard of. The Battle of Fort Nooherooka. Long before there was a United States and long before there was a North Carolina, Grifton didn't exist. Kinston, Snow Hill, the Tuscarora people lived here. They lived throughout much of eastern North Carolina. The rivers were their highways, so were the creeks. The swamps provided food, the forest provided cover. This was their homeland. Then everything changed. Land disputes, expansion, and a slave trade. Believe it or not, Native Americans were being sold into slavery. Violence, and then there was a war. And eventually a final stand at the fortified stronghold near Contentnia Creek, a place called Nooherooka. For those of y'all just joining, my Tick Bite, North Carolina tongue has a tough time pronouncing that word. But anyway, hundreds died there. Entire families disappeared there, and the future of eastern North Carolina changed there. What made this story different for me is that I didn't discover it in a college classroom. I didn't learn about it in K through 12, even though it happened right here within walking distance of us. I grew up in the middle of where all this happened. There was a field just down the road within walking distance of my house that I could walk out when there weren't crops in the field and pick up buckets full of arrowheads. I had heard there were Native American settlements, and I'd heard there were old battle sites around, and I had climbed on twisted trees that once marked ancient trails. See, the Native Americans would take a pecan sapling and pin it to the ground so it would grow crooked, and these crooked trees were signposts in the woods. That's how they navigated. I visited with the descendants of the Tuscarora who still call this region home, and only later did I realize all those pieces belong to the same story. Over the next several episodes, we're going to uncover that story together. The war, the people, the fort, the battle, and the survivors. And with the history that still lies beneath our feet. I'm Todd Edwards, this is Tick Bite NC, and this series that I'm beginning is Fort Nooherooka and the people that live there. Now, before I leave, I'd like to thank everyone who's going to join me on this journey throughout one of the most important chapters of Eastern North Carolina history. History that matters, not because it tells us who to blame and not because it tells us who to celebrate, because it helps us understand how we got here. Fort Nooherooka is way more than a battlefield. It's a reminder of the Tuscarora people that lived here long before us. They raised families, they worked the land, they built communities, they had towns, they had a working government. They faced hardships, they made sacrifices, and they left traces of their lives behind. Some of those traces survive in museums, some are in archaeological sites, some survive in family stories, and some still rest beneath the soil of eastern North Carolina. I've researched this series, and I've often thought about the arrowhead fields I walked in as a child, the artifacts I dug out of the ground, and the stories passed down through local families. I've thought about the conversations I've been fortunate enough to have with descendants of the Tuscarora people, and these experiences reminded me that history is not dead. It's all around us, sometimes hidden and forgotten, but never truly gone. But if this series encourages you to learn more about your own community, your own family history, or the stories hidden in the places you call home, then it accomplished its purpose. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting Tick Bite NC. And remember, the most interesting stories are often the ones hiding right beneath your feet. I'm Todd Edwards. Until next time, take care of each other, and never stop exploring history, especially the history of eastern North Carolina. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and the reason that I keep recording my stories live. In 2023, I was in a head-on collision. A reckless driver hit me head-on, running 55, 60 miles an hour, and the impact of the wreck should have killed me. I do have a brain injury from it, and the good news is I wasn't paralyzed and I can walk and my legs still work, but I did take a pretty nasty blow to the head. Reading and recording these stories live is part of my physical therapy, so you're joining me on my journey as I do this. I have noticed a tremendous difference in myself and my ability to think since I started doing this, and I appreciate you joining me. So tune in next time when we're going to do Chapter 1 about the Tuscarora people and Fort Nooherooka. Catch you next time.